If growing your dairy is on your mind, this episode is for you. Make sure you ask these 7 questions first. In this episode, we sit down with Jim Moriarty, Director of Dairy at Compeer Financial. With over 30 years in the industry, Jim walks us through the must-have conversations on family, finances, and the future before adding cows or investing in growth. That and more right here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Compeer Financial. Compeer Financial is a member-owned farm credit cooperative serving and supporting agriculture in rural America. Their dairy team brings world-class expertise and tailored solutions to support dairy producers' financial goals and lending needs. We're here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, actually sitting down at World Dairy Expo with Jim Moriarty from Compeer Financial. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. And today we're going to be walking through 7 key areas of conversations that you have with dairy clients as they prepare to add cows, dial up production, perhaps take on an additional site. And so far in 2025, we're going to be talking about what that appetite looks like as we head into 2026 and some of the conversations you've been having with your clients, as well as really get into these 7 steps. But before we get into that part, Jim, let's just set the stage by saying you know a thing or two about dairy finance.
Well, I've been around for a while, so now I've had the good fortune of being in the industry for over 30 years now, and I also had kind of a variety of locations. I've been with Compeer here for the last 12 years, but have had a chance to work with some other farm credits in different areas of the country, so get a little bit of an experience working and background across the country. So that's been a really nice way to kind of help deliver some value, hopefully, for our customers and clients that we work with today. But I grew up on a dairy farm, 70 miles north of here, so I kind of come by the dairy industry naturally, and it's just been I've just enjoyed working with the farms and the families over the years.
And they've enjoyed working with you likewise,
I hope so.
Jim.
Yep.
So this year, what have you seen for that appetite and interest for growth in families that you're working with and partnerships that you're working with to want to add cows?
Yeah, so I would say that there's a pretty high level of interest in we've really been in a pretty good run on the industry where financially farms are sitting in probably as good a position as they've been in a number of years. Management capacity on the farms is really good. I mean, we're doing such a good job with the herds. So I think, there's a number of our clients that we're working with are really interested in what's that next step. And we'll say there's a little bit of caution still kind of blended in there. Not so much. I think they really are focused. They want to do that. They have son or daughter or other family members coming back to the operation. They've got older facilities that they, feel like, hey, I could update and do better. But the construction costs have been really high and the interest rates have been higher. And then you take in, replacement heifer costs being really high. So that's kind of put a little element of caution in to that desire to the next step. I will say we're in a pretty, this is the time of the year where those conversations for next year are really happening right now. And you feel like there's momentum, like we want to do something next year, and those plans are maybe getting ready to take that next step.
So this is the perfect time to sit down and have this conversation with 7 key areas to address before expanding your dairy, before making that final decision and moving forward. And so the 7 steps that you've lined out, step number 1, you just touched on this a little bit, but expand on that first step. That first step of setting the stage for succession and leadership.
So when you're looking at these dairy investments, and it's been that way for a long time, but really the dollars that we're investing when we do some kind of a growth is so much larger today. So you're looking at a 10 or 20 year investment time frame, really, when you're doing these things. And so from a family dynamics, you want to make sure everybody's on the same page and really committed to wanting to move forward. And so you might have, mom and dad that are still kind of driving the ship, if you will, right now. And then we've got, probably some sons and daughters coming in behind. And so it's really important to sit down and have that conversation about what's everybody's roles as we step forward. Do we have somebody identified that's going to take that leadership role for the team? Because it's really important that we do kind of have that ironed out. And then, from the senior generation standpoint, as they get to the point where they want to step back, they probably have to be of the mindset that I might not get paid out on all my equity up front, because just substantially, that's probably not something that the business can do all at once. So it's got to be kind of a phased in kind of buyout when that time comes. So communication is really important in helping set the stage to make sure everybody views and is committed to the plan as you go down that path.
And this first step, that communication within ownership and family, and sometimes ownership isn't just family.
No.
Right? It really is, as you said, it's identifying the interest and that delegation of duties, but also it's the financial side.
Yeah. And sometimes everybody's got somebody comfortable that, hey, we're going to take on a lot more debt to make this happen. And you got to just be kind of comfortable with that, know kind of what some of the metrics we need to hit to make this work. And like you said, there is more, as we've got key people that maybe have been with us on the dairy for a while. And we want to have them have an ownership interest so that they're with us. And how do we do that? And maybe it's not ownership, but there's some way to kind of simulate ownership. Some of those conversations can be uncomfortable, but you just need to kind of do that.
So you mentioned they can be uncomfortable. That means sometimes maybe there needs to be another person in the room that isn't related, that can have that unbiased opinion or unbiased guidance. Mediation, really, I think is the word I'm looking for here. Jim, is that sometimes you?
Oh, yeah. So sometimes we'll start that. I would say, we can help with the financial. We can identify, hey, some of these things need to be kind of talked through. But a lot of times, particularly as you extend out the family, the spouses and things like that, and what their interests are, oftentimes having, somebody that's kind of professional and just kind of bringing those things out, because sometimes it's the family member that's not saying anything is the one that you really want to help bring out, because you'll find out that all of a sudden, no, they really had reservations. They were hesitant to bring it up because everybody else was heading down this path. And so sometimes that's where some of the people that really are focus on transition planning can help bring that out. I like to think we have kind of a role in that from a financial standpoint, and helping, guide through some of those conversations.
And this is step number one, the foundational step
Yep.
before we get to the other 6 steps of really making these decisions about expanding your dairy, growing your operation, and that's the most important thing.
That's right, because all the other decisions, you have to have a decision-making process amongst your family to decide what kind of parlor you're going to build or whatever. And if you haven't put together a framework for those conversations, you're going to hit, and I've seen it happen where it's just somebody just says, this is the way we're going to do it, and then everybody's unhappy, and that's not the foundation you want to start down path on.
When you talk about having a framework for those conversations, a way of making decisions, anything that stands out in your mind that you've seen work well?
Well, I think, you have to have, it's not a conversation while we're passing in the milking parlor, right? You have to have dedicated time. It doesn't have to be weekly, but, there is time that has a management team or a family. We get together, we have an agenda, and we kind of talk through what we need to. Sometimes it's operational, more day to day, and sometimes it's long range. Just a little bit of separation from everything else you have going on. Might only be an hour a week, but when you look at where people have been successful, that seems to be a key, is to find a way that we can dedicate time to really kind of talk through and make those decisions and come to a consensus as a group.
As you carve out that dedicated time, have those conversations about succession, leadership, finance, what all of those things look like, well, then you get to step number 2.
Yeah.
And what's step number 2?
So that, which is kind of been more of a recent, for years it was, we're just going to build, that was kind of our focus. Well, now it's been a little more. Now there's opportunities where we're maybe looking at, do we build more on our current site? Is there an opportunity for another site we always say we come back to, before you kind of go down the second site path, have you really maximized your current facility? And that's really around a milking parlor. If you're running your existing parlor 5 hours a shift, well, then, you really probably would be wanting to look, hey, can I maximize that? Can I get some more throughput through my existing parlor? Because that's almost always going to be your first step of efficiency. If you can get, the team members that you have there, more cows, more milk out of that same facility. But if you're running that parlor and you've kind of maxed out what it can be and you're running it 22, 23 hours a day, then I think that second site can be a really viable option to look at. Now, not everybody's going to want to go down that path, and that's perfectly fine. But we do kind of encourage people, at least consider it. It gives you something to kind of look at as if you maybe do decide to go down a building and constructing more on your current site. You at least got something you can compare to. And sometimes that second site can be a stepping stone. I'll milk there for a while until I build up and then come back and make that next step on your home site.
So you've seen that sometimes the second site is part of a long-term plan that actually involves milking more cows back at the home site.
Yeah. So you like, hey, I want to add over the next 5 years, 1,000 cows. Could be 500, but 1,000. And there's a 200 cow dairy here. Well, I can start, adding those pretty inexpensively, just milk only there. And help build that herd up, so then it's not such a big jump when you come back and want to add on and reinvest at home. So those are getting to be more common kind of strategies to get there.
Yeah, I know you work with a lot of farms that are in the process or have already taken on additional sites and have a clear strategy around their why for doing it, and part of, like we said, that bigger picture of their future. Any stories that come to mind that then you can share of some of these situations where they worked through that opportunity to look at a second site, and whether they were a yes for it or maybe they said no to it and turned down that opportunity? What comes to mind of some of the farms that you've had those conversations
so
with?
The ones that have been successful, that they've got somebody that's key on their management team, can be a family member, whatever, that's kind of really willing to focus their time on the next site. And a lot of times we'll kind of concentrate our major management activities on, it could be the home dairy, but one site. So we're going to do all the calving at one location, and that management focus there. And then the second site is going to be really just a milk only kind of facility. And so if you have, somebody on either management team or family that's, hey, and it can be a really good thing because it gives them an opportunity to this is kind of my area to really focus on and develop and build. But, you want some commonality, the stall sizes to be similar so that when you're moving cattle back and forth, it's not a completely different environment. It can work, but if you got a rotary here and a parallel here, all of a sudden you got training issues you're doing all the time. And so when you ask about where people have looked at them and not worked or decided not to go down that path, it's maybe the cost is really, but it's just the dairy layout and throughput, stall sizing, all those things just don't mesh. And then sometimes, which is a perfectly legitimate thing, there's family members that they are a tight-knit group and they want to kind of all be in the same area, and that's perfectly fine.
And that's why it's so critical to ask the right questions and sometimes have that extra voice of reason to dig deeper into how is this really going to work, not just from the goal of being able to grow, add more cows, make more milk, and increase cash flow, but logistically with employees, with efficiencies. And so great points there with step number 2 of evaluating, is home the place to grow or is it another site? And so that leads us to step number 3. And I think this one is one that really hits home in the recent years, because at least in our region where, we're at Wisconsin, upper Midwest, one of the greatest limiting factors to dairy growth has been milk plant capacity. And so touch on that. Why is that so important as step number 3? And what should those early conversations look like
Yeah.
with your processor?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of my career, it's like when you're ready, you just build, and there was always some place to take the milk.
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, it feels limiting and restrictive, but the idea that, hey, we want to make sure that the plant has a home for the product that we're producing does make logical sense, right? So the conversations we always encourage, even if you might be 2 or 3 years down the road before you think you'll be ready, talk to that processor early. Get on, because they all kind of have a list of producers that have expressed interest in growth. So when the plants, it's helpful for them to know that, hey, I can get the milk supply if we decide to expand our plant. So just the fact that you're stepping forward and saying, hey, I think I want to add cows in the next 2 or 3 years is helpful for the plant. The conversation then gets into, we were really fortunate, probably here in the upper Midwest, that we have a lot of plant locations relatively nearby. So find a fit that, from that you can feel like you really align with. Some of it's transportation costs, we're not having to pay $1 a hundredweight to get our milk, 200 miles away, that it's something a little more manageable than that. And you have a product mix that kind of aligns with the components that you're producing, and you kind of feel like you're on the same page. But the main point always is earlier conversations are better, because sometimes the processor will tell you, we're just not interested in growing. Well, then, okay, I got to look and see what my alternatives are.
Going back to that
Yep.
core of communication from
Yep.
the family level to the partner level to the milk plant level. And then we get to step number 4. So say you've got ownership and management team on board. You've got your eyes on what direction growth looks like. You've had the conversation with the milk plant and the go ahead, the green light. What's next?
Yeah, so now you got to build something, right? But now, we got to, kind of help narrow that focus to what we can do. And so we try, a lot of times people will find a builder or contractor, equipment manufacturer that they're really comfortable with, and they'll just kind of go down that path. And that's fine, but we just still make sure you talk to 2 or 3 builders, 2 or 3 different vendors. Just, it helps you kind of identify different type styles that are out there, and does help a little bit with some of the cost comparison, and you'll pick up different ideas from each of them. And I say the other thing is be realistic. If you're talking to builders and dairy equipment people, and you don't give them an idea of what my budget is, now all of a sudden, they're down a path and you're way larger than what your budget is. Well, now you've just you cycle through a lot of time. So, and I've seen people say, well, my budget's $3 million, and well, we can do 3 to 5. Well, in reality, no, it needs to be 3 to 3.5, right? And you be honest about what you can really comfortably do. And then, most of the builders and contractors can kind of find a way. Maybe it's not everything you want, and you have to end up maybe multiple stepping it, but at least you're helping to narrow and identify what you can actually get done. Encourage people, investigate 2 or 3 options, be open and receptive to the feedback they can give you on just flow and efficiency and functionality. You'll almost always find the builder or contractor that you feel most comfortable with, and can provide you the ongoing service that you're going to want. But it's important to go through that discovery process.
And that moves us to step number 5, and that's where you really get involved.
Yeah, hopefully we're engaging in some of these conversations as, from the financial perspective or the lender perspective along the way. But now when they really have kind of identified the cost, we identified here's what we want to do, then, we're going to dig in with our client, and we'll almost always have had their financials. Let's see what that impact is on your equity and how well that can cash flow. And we really try to emphasize that we don't want to, when we do this project, that we don't have any more lending capacity with you after this. So we, a lot of times if we put out, which is kind of, we want to keep, your equity to assets, 45 to 50%. But that doesn't mean we want to go right to the lowest number right off the bat, because things will happen in that construction and expansion phase, and we always want to keep some capacity available. So we talk through, can we support the plan based on the financials we have, and how do we make sure that we have some cushion available for those things that, unexpected, or, we have some overruns or whatever. So we're balancing it off against, here's, the kind of range we have had experience that works. And then, because each of these is kind of a 2 or 3 year timeline, building up the herd, getting to that production level you want. So we have to help model through to make sure that we've got enough working capital and cash flow available that we can keep everything moving forward. Because the last thing we want is to get the barn built, and we don't have room for, we don't have enough money left for the cows. I mean, that would you just don't want. And we have gotten a lot better at making sure we don't get into that spot. But it just takes some planning and again, some really going through some of the numbers and the dialogue up front to do that.
Any key metrics or key numbers that you really look at, especially when we look at, like debt per cow or the debt to asset ratio? Like, what are you looking at when you have those conversations on your finance?
So the kind of rough number when we look at the balance sheet. So we want to generally stay above 45% equity to assets, 45 to 50%. That we found that's a range that tends to work better. On the cash flow side, we used to always talk about debt per cow, and that number's gotten harder because the construction costs have gone up and stuff. So then we've tried, how can we structure the debt where the debt service, the principal and interest payments are 3 to 350 a hundredweight or less, because then we know that the bank payments aren't taking up so much of your cash flow. Because we know if we start getting up to $4, now you think even on $20 all-in milk check, now all of a sudden 1/5 of my income is gone to service debt, and we just know that's going to be a challenge. So that's how we've kind of migrated a little bit away from debt per cow and kind of looking at what's that. If we put all the principal and interest payments together, are we in the management range, 3 to 350 a hundredweight? We found that's kind of a workable number. Now, the one exception is if somebody's doing a robotic dairy, much more capital intensive, but you maybe do have some additional labor savings. So there you might be able to, we might be comfortable going up to a higher, so comfortable 4 or 450 in terms of your principal and interest per hundredweight produced. But you're also going to get some labor savings. So you're trying to look at, can we pull down the labor cost per hundredweight to help offset that, and that's usually what those kind of designs are intended to do.
And that's why it's so important to work with a banker and a lending institution that really truly understands dairy specifically, and just how situational things can be when, as you said in that perfect example of robotic versus conventional barn, and understanding that, okay, it's going to look different on the front end, but on the overtime labor, that's going to look different too compared to conventional parlor. And that one gets us to step number 6, and this is a big one, probably one of the most talked about conversations in the dairy industry right now. Don't you think?
Yeah, so we're touching on, where do we get our replacement cattle where heifer inventory is really tight. If you're out looking to buy cows or springing heifers is really high. So, we always used to be, hey, we build it and we'll just go out and buy cattle to fill it up.
Does that philosophy still work?
It's that's a challenge, I would say, right now. I mean, we're talking almost $4,000 a cow, and that just. So, almost all the conversations now are on, hey, as part of that 2 or 3 year planning cycle before I'm there, I'm going to start producing more of my own heifers to help fill that gap. And so with the genetics and the sex semen tools that we have available to us, we can dial that in and all of a sudden start producing more heifers. Now, it also brings a little more of a challenge, again, back to that interim cash flow, because now we're producing more heifers. We're giving up some of that beef calf sale revenue that's been really supportive of our cash flow here recently. So it's important on us as lenders that we factor that in, because we might have a 2-year time frame where cash is going to could theoretically be tight because we're raising a bunch more heifers than we actually need for our current herd. We're building for that future growth, and we're giving up some revenue. But that is probably the prudent approach to take. And, it also kind of alleviates some of the concerns about when you're out buying cattle from different herds. And, some of that, we've gotten a lot better about not having as many, kind of disease issues and stuff. Cattle selection has been really good, but it still is always a risk when you're bringing in outside cattle. So if we can produce most of our own replacements, and, our all-in cost to raising heifers is probably still, $2,000 to $2,500. So that's a big investment, but it's quite a little bit less than buying for $4,000 right now.
And then, as you said, with any animals that do need to be purchased to fulfill the capacity that you have in the barn, there's going to be an impact on cash flow from that expenditure,
Yep.
even if you've been able to grow from within. So how important is planning for that, even if you are doing a lot of the work to self-populate?
So, that's been, really, like, again, the new dynamic really in a way the last 2 or 3 years, but we're like, hey, we got to help try to find in our financing package a way to kind of cover part of that. And so some of that's going to be some additional cow loans, and we've kind of migrated to where we'll do some of that cow lending on an interest-only basis, so that'll kind of help cash flow. And then, the one advantage here again in the Midwest, our real estate values have gone up. So we'll lean into the real estate a little, and we can stretch those payments out over a longer term. So we're actually using some of our real estate equity maybe to help fund some of those cow investments, and that helps us balance the cash flow out. But we're going to be really mindful working with the client. Okay, how can we support making sure that we've got the cattle there that you need, get the barn full in a way that's manageable for your cash flow. But we're probably going to use a little bit of real estate equity to do that. We're going to, set up some cow funding lines to do that, but it's a combination of things that are probably going to help us get there.
And so we're at step number 7.
It can be the one that can stop you if not handled right. And of course, that's really talking about your public communication and your permitting process. So everybody thinks, and it is more intense when we talk about a CAFO-sized operation, so 700 cows and above. But even if you're doing something smaller than that, it's always important to connect with your neighbors. You don't want your neighbors that the first time that they find out that you're going to expand is a public notice from the DNR. Then you're already kind of setting yourself up for some resistance. So as soon as you're kind of, hey, I think we're ready to move forward, talk to those nearby neighbors. Now you know the dynamics of all your neighbors and who's going to be receptive and who's maybe going to be a little bit of a challenge. But it's just important to have those conversations. And then obviously you're going to need to talk to the DNR and the permitting process to make that to work. It's a fact of life. We got to figure out how to do that. But if we can help, persuade our neighbors that, hey, this is going to be you've seen how I've operated, that our family has done a good job at managing what we're doing. We're going to continue to do that and get your neighbors and your community on board. It's going to help a lot. But that is, and it's for a lot of our clients, it's not their favorite thing to do public hearings or go out and talk about what you're wanting to do, but it's important to do that. And usually we find that there's maybe one of the family members that is better at doing that. So if you kind of have, that's one of the roles that somebody can take on, that can do kind of our public promotion and image building and just kind of reassure everybody that we're going to do things the right way and take care of our cows and our land and be a good neighbor.
And that's just as much a part of the growth strategy
Yep.
as every other step that we've talked about today, Jim.
Yep.
And so we have walked through these different stages and phases of making this decision to expand your dairy, to grow your operation, to grow your business, how to grow, where to grow, who to have at the table, and who needs to be communicated to
Yep.
outside of the kitchen table
Yep.
or the office or boardroom table as well. And so as we wrap up our conversation here, Jim, anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, so I just say, sometimes it's like you start laying out all this and people go, oh my God, this is just too much. And you rely on your advisors and your professionals to help you through. There's people on the permitting side that are really very good at helping you navigate that part and can help you with the public perception. Rely on your lender to help you on the financial management side. And use, and even back to the front, maybe bring in somebody that's really skilled in succession planning. And if you it's not a linear process, you're going to kind of blend these steps as you go along. It's, sorry to say, it's a balance between not just charging ahead and on the other hand, being so reluctant, you never move forward. So, find that spot, but it's a planning process. Lay out the steps you need to bring in and rely on the people you can help you do that. And it is a manageable process, and you can get through it and be really successful, but it just takes forethought and some planning to get there.
And some good guidance and counsel along the way.
Hopefully that's right.
Well, Jim, thank you for sitting down with me here to talk about the 7 steps, the 7 considerations to sit down and really ask yourselves and your team before you grow to set yourself up for success.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
You just heard from Jim Moriarty of Compeer Financial. His checklist is clear. Plan well, communicate often, and grow with purpose. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thanks for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Don't forget to follow, rate, and share this episode. As always, keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy. This episode is brought to you by Compeer Financial. Compeer Financial is a member-owned farm credit cooperative serving and supporting agriculture in rural America. Their dairy team brings world-class expertise and tailored solutions to support dairy producers' financial goals and lending needs.